A new mother brings home a rescue, and from night one the dog won't leave the crib, sniffing, whining, pressing its nose to the baby's lips like a siren only it can hear. Doctors shrug. A trusted caregiver smiles. The father wants calm, but the dog keeps sounding the alarm. And then the baby's skin goes cold, a frantic dash, a near miss, and a pattern no one can ignore. When the mother starts digging, someone tries to stop her. Hard. What is the dog smelling? And who's desperate to keep that truth buried? Through the kitchen window, afternoon sunlight cast long shadows across the linoleum floor. Laurel stood at the counter, mechanically spreading peanut butter on bread while keeping one ear tuned to the baby monitor. Her son's soft breathing crackled through the speaker, accompanied by the occasional shuffling sounds of Calder's movement near the crib. She hadn't slept well since that night at the hospital. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, visible whenever she caught her reflection. The doctor's words kept echoing in her mind. First-time mothers often experience heightened anxiety. It's perfectly normal. Normal. She pressed her lips together, the word tasting bitter. Was it normal for a rescue dog to fixate so intensely on a baby? Was it normal for her chest to tighten every time she remembered how pale and still her son had been? A whine crackled through the monitor, making her pause mid-spread. Calder's tags jingled as he moved around the nursery. Laurel held her breath, listening. The whine came again, longer this time. "It's fine," she whispered to herself. "Everything's fine." But her hands trembled as she set down the knife. The stairs creaked under her careful steps as she made her way to the nursery. Through the half-open door, she could see Calder's large form, his nose pressed against the crib slats. His tail hung low, none of the usual friendly wag present. "Hey, boy," she said softly. "What's wrong?" Calder turned to look at her, his amber eyes intense. He whined again, pawing at the crib. The sound sent chills down her spine. Laurel crossed to the crib, her heart pounding. Her baby boy lay there, one tiny fist curled near his face. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths, but something made her reach down to touch his cheek. The skin felt cool under her fingertips. "Maybe it's just the air conditioning," she murmured. But she was already reaching for the thermometer in the nearby changing table drawer. Calder watched her every move, his body tense. The digital display beeped, 97.1 degrees. Lower than usual, but not dangerously so. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She picked up her son, cradling him close. His head lolled slightly against her shoulder. "Wake up, sweetie," she coaxed, rubbing his back. "Time for lunch." He stirred with a weak cry, nothing like his usual energetic fussing. Calder paced beside them, his nails clicking on the hardwood floor. Laurel's phone sat on the dresser, Dr. Marston's number still readily available from their last visit. Her finger hovered over the call button. What if she was overreacting again? The memory of the emergency room staff's kind but dismissive smiles made her cheeks burn. A soft whimper from her son decided it. She pressed the button, holding him tighter as the phone rang. "Dr. Marston's office," a cheerful voice answered. "This is Laurel Whitford," she said, working to keep her voice steady. "I need to speak with Dr. Marston about my son. Something's not right." "I'll check if the doctor's available. Can you describe the symptoms?" Laurel swallowed hard. "He's cooler than usual, lethargic, not really responding like normal." She glanced down at Calder, who hadn't taken his eyes off the baby. "And my dog. He seems worried." A pause on the other end. "Your dog seems worried." "I know how it sounds," Laurel said quickly. "But he's trained as a medical alert dog. He belonged to someone else before, but he... Mrs. Whitford? The receptionist's voice softened with practiced patience. Dr. Marston's quite busy today. If you're concerned, you can bring your son in tomorrow morning. We have an opening at 9:30. Tomorrow morning. Laurel looked down at her baby's face, too pale against her shoulder. Calder whined again, more urgently this time. No, she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. This can't wait until tomorrow. Something is wrong with my son, and I need the doctor to see him today. Mrs. Whitford? Either Dr. Marston sees him today, or I'm taking him to the emergency room again, and this time, I'm not leaving until they figure out what's wrong. The silence stretched for a moment. Please hold. Laurel paced the nursery, phone pressed to her ear, her son cradled against her chest. Calder followed each circuit, staying close to them. The hold music played cheerfully, a stark contrast to the knot of worry in her stomach. Finally, the receptionist returned. Dr. Marston can see you at 4 o'clock. It's the last appointment of the day. Laurel checked the clock. 2:30. We'll be there. She hung up and looked down at Calder, who sat watching her with those knowing eyes. I believe you, she whispered. I don't care if everyone thinks I'm crazy. Something's wrong, and we're going to figure out what it is. She gathered the diaper bag with shaking hands, double-checking supplies, while her son dozed against her shoulder. Formula, diapers, wipes, spare clothes. The familiar routine helped steady her nerves. Calder followed them downstairs, his tail still low, but his steps purposeful. At the front door, he sat expectantly, looking between Laurel and her car keys on the hook. You want to come too, boy? The thought of leaving him behind made her chest tight. His presence over the past few days had been oddly reassuring, like having a silent ally in her growing fears. She clipped on his leash with her free hand. Okay, we're all going. And this time, they're going to listen to us. The late afternoon sun was harsh as they stepped outside. Laurel settled her son into his car seat, noting how he barely stirred at the movement. Calder jumped into the back seat without prompting, positioning himself next to the baby carrier. His alert posture spoke of guard duty rather than casual car ride excitement. As Laurel backed out of the driveway, she caught sight of her face in the rearview mirror. The worry was plain in her expression, but there was something else too. Determination. They could call her an anxious new mother all they wanted. She knew what she knew. We're going to get answers, she said firmly, more to herself than to her passengers. In the back seat, Calder's whine seemed almost like agreement. Laurel sat cross-legged on the nursery floor, watching Calder's steady patrol around the crib. The morning sun filtered through pale blue curtains, casting gentle shadows across the room. She should be doing laundry, cleaning bottles, or catching up on sleep. All the normal things new mothers did during precious nap time. Instead, she couldn't take her eyes off the dog. It's nothing, she whispered to herself, echoing the pediatrician's words from their last visit. He's just protective. That's what dogs do. Calder's head snapped toward her, amber eyes intent. He patted over and pressed his warm bulk against her side, as if trying to convince her otherwise. His coat felt soft under her fingers as she absently stroked his shoulder. You're making me paranoid, buddy. She tried to smile, but it felt weak. We can't keep running to the emergency room every time you act weird. The next few days settled into an uneasy rhythm. Laurel threw herself into establishing routines, feeding schedules, tummy time, daily walks with Calder. She downloaded meditation apps and practiced deep breathing when anxiety crept in. Everything was fine, normal, perfect, until it wasn't. Laurel? Ronan's voice carried up the stairs one evening. Did you move my work boots again?" "They're by the back door," she called back, not looking up from the baby's evening bottle. Calder lay at her feet, but his usual relaxed posture was gone. His ears were forward, muscles tense. The first paw at the crib came exactly 4 minutes later. "No," Laurel murmured, clutching her son closer. "You're just being—" But the words died in her throat as she felt the change. Her baby's skin grew cool and clammy against her chest, his usual post bottle wiggling, falling still. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers, then stopped. What would she even say? That her dog predicted another episode? Dr. Marston's gentle suggestion of postpartum anxiety support groups still stung. "Everything okay up here?" Ronan appeared in the doorway, work boots in hand. His expression shifted from casual to concerned as he took in her face. "Laurel?" "He's doing it again," she said quietly. Getting cool, less responsive, and Calder knew. He always knows. Ronan sighed, setting down his boots. "Honey, we talked about this. Babies' temperatures fluctuate. It's normal. And Calder's probably just picking up on your stress." "No." Laurel stood carefully, supporting their son's head. "Watch him. Just watch." As if on cue, Calder circled the room, sniffing intently. He returned to the crib, pawing at it once more before looking directly at Ronan with those knowing eyes. "See? He's fine now," Ronan said, but his voice held a note of uncertainty. "Maybe we should talk to someone. About the anxiety, I mean. It's completely normal after having a baby." "I'm not anxious." The words came out sharper than intended, making their son stir. Laurel lowered her voice. "I'm observant. There's a difference." That night, after Ronan fell asleep, Laurel dug an old notebook from her desk drawer. The first page she opened to still held neat columns of accounting figures from her working days. She turned to a fresh page and began to write. Date, time, Calder's behavior, baby's symptoms, duration. The next week filled 3 pages. Calder's alerts came with precise consistency, always 4 to 6 minutes before her son's episodes. The pattern was impossible to ignore, yet explaining it to others felt equally impossible. "I just don't know, sweetie," her mother said during their weekly video chat. "Dogs are intuitive, but this sounds... Well, you know how everything feels more intense with a new baby. Remember how I was convinced you had a terrible allergy when you were little? Turned out to be normal baby sniffles." Her best friend Rachel was gentler, but no more convinced. "Maybe you need to get out more. I can watch him for a few hours. Give you a break from all this monitoring." Even her online mom groups, usually supportive of every parental concern, responded with well-meaning suggestions about anxiety medication and sleep deprivation. Laurel stopped sharing her worries, but she didn't stop watching or writing. One afternoon, while organizing the nursery closet, she found Calder's intake paperwork from the shelter. She'd barely glanced at it before, too caught up in his gentle demeanor and the way he'd instantly bonded with her son. Now, she studied every line. "Previous owner deceased," she read aloud. "Trained as medical alert dog, specialized in..." The next words were smudged, the paper water-damaged at the corner. Laurel grabbed her phone, searching for the shelter's number. "Hi, yes," she said when someone finally answered. "I adopted a dog named Calder last month. I need more information about his previous owner and training." "Let me check our records," the volunteer said. "Oh yes, sweet boy. Good with kids. Unfortunately, we don't have much background information. He came to us through estate services after his owner passed. Why do you ask? Is there a problem?" Laurel watched Calder sleeping peacefully by the crib. No problem. Just curious." That evening, as she added another entry to her journal, Ronan peered over her shoulder. "What's all this?" She showed him the pages of careful observations. Look at the timing. It's not random, Ronan. He knows something we don't. Laurel, he rubbed his face, looking tired. This isn't healthy. You're creating patterns where there aren't any. Dogs can't predict medical events. Actually, they can. There are diabetes alert dogs, seizure alert dogs. Our son doesn't have diabetes or seizures. He's perfectly healthy. The pediatrician said so last week. Then why does this keep happening? Laurel gestured at her journal. Why does our medical alert dog, yes, that's what he was trained as, keep warning us? Because you're interpreting every move he makes as a warning. Ronan's voice rose with frustration. You're scaring yourself, and honestly, you're starting to scare me too. The words hit her like a physical blow. She closed the journal, fingers pressing hard against its cover. I know what I'm seeing. Maybe. Ronan softened his tone. Maybe you should talk to someone. Professionally, I mean. Just to help sort things out. In the corner of her eye, Laurel saw Calder raise his head, attention fixing on the crib with familiar intensity. She checked her watch, knowing what would come next. 4 minutes. She'd wait 4 minutes, add another entry to her journal, and keep watching. Keep counting. Keep believing what she saw, even if she had to believe it alone. The bills piled up like autumn leaves on their kitchen counter. Laurel stared at them, calculator in hand, while her son played on his activity mat nearby. The numbers refused to add up differently, no matter how many times she checked. The harsh reality of their financial situation glared back at her from the spreadsheet she'd created, each column a reminder of how quickly their savings were dwindling. We knew this was coming, Ronan said gently, setting down his coffee mug with a soft clink against the countertop. His work-worn hands wrapped around the ceramic as if seeking comfort. My salary alone just isn't enough anymore with the mortgage increase. Laurel nodded, her throat tight. I know. I thought we'd have more time. She tucked a loose strand of light brown hair behind her ear, the simple gold wedding band on her finger catching the morning light. Their carefully planned budget had unraveled faster than expected, leaving them with no choice but the inevitable. The search for childcare felt like a part-time job itself. Every highly rated center had a waiting list months long, some extending well into the next year. Laurel spent hours on the phone, her green eyes growing more tired with each dead end. The in-home daycares either cost more than she'd make working or set off immediate red flags: unsecured cleaning supplies, distracted caregivers, or overwhelming child-to-adult ratios. Then she found Sunshine Steps, run by Delia Prentice. The facility occupied a renovated, Victorian house with a rainbow-painted fence and a playground that looked like something from a magazine. Brightly colored climbing structures stood on immaculate rubber surfaces, while child-sized gardening plots lined the perimeter. Inside, everything gleamed with professional polish. Not a toy out of place, not a smudge on any surface. Classical music played softly in the background while preschoolers worked at tiny tables with focused attention, their movements almost eerily coordinated. We maintain the highest standards, Delia said, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the humid day that had left Laurel's own hair frizzing at the temples. She wore a pale blue cardigan that matched the walls, not a wrinkle to be found. Her manicured hand gestured elegantly toward a display of certificates and awards. Our staff-to-child ratio exceeds state requirements, and we've won awards for our early education curriculum. Even our infants follow a structured development program. Laurel clutched her son closer as they toured the infant room. The space was painted in calming pastels, with cribs spaced evenly along one wall, and a row of high-end bouncy seats facing a mural of forest animals. It's impressive, she said, trying to imagine her baby spending his days here among strangers. We have an opening in our infant program starting next week. Delia mentioned casually, checking her slim silver watch. They fill up quickly, of course. I have 3 other families touring tomorrow. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes conveyed the urgency. Decide now, or lose your chance. The tuition was at the very top of their budget, requiring them to cut back on virtually everything else, but the place seemed perfect, too perfect to pass up. The thought of returning to work already twisted Laurel's stomach with anxiety. She couldn't bear the added stress of substandard childcare. Laurel scheduled a trial visit with Calder, knowing she'd need to be certain he could handle being separated from the baby during the day. The large shepherd mix had become incredibly protective, rarely leaving the infant's side when at home. The moment they stepped through Sunshine Step's front door for the trial, Calder's demeanor changed dramatically. His tail dropped like a stone, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. His amber eyes darted around the pristine entryway, muscles tensing beneath his fur. "Calder, no," Laurel commanded firmly, giving a gentle tug on his leash. He quieted but pressed against her legs, ears flat against his head. The scar on his foreleg seemed to stand out more prominently as his fur bristled. "Many dogs are territorial about their young charges," Delia said smoothly, keeping her distance from the agitated animal. She adjusted her cardigan, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features before her professional smile returned. "He'll adjust once he realizes this is a safe space. We've had many families with pets make the transition successfully." Laurel wasn't so sure, but they needed this to work. The alternative was financial disaster. She signed the enrollment papers that afternoon, ignoring the way Calder remained vigilant and tense throughout the entire process, his eyes never leaving Delia as she explained their policies. The first week passed in a blur of tears, mostly hers, and adjustments. Every morning Calder watched them leave with mournful eyes, standing sentinel at the window until their car disappeared from view. Every afternoon, he performed what Laurel started calling his inspection ritual, thoroughly sniffing every inch of the baby, paying special attention to his face and mouth. His movements were methodical and precise, reminiscent of how he'd been trained for medical alert work with his previous owner. "He's just making sure his boy is okay," Laurel told herself, absently stroking Calder's fur as he completed his examination. But something about the dog's intensity bothered her. It wasn't just protectiveness. There was urgency in his behavior that made her stomach knot with unease. Her son seemed different too. The usually active baby now dozed through dinner and bedtime, barely waking for feedings. His limbs hung heavy when she changed him. None of the usual kicking and squirming that had become their nightly ritual. When she mentioned it to the infant room teacher, Miss Jenny, the young woman smiled reassuringly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with practiced ease. "He's learning so much. All that stimulation naturally makes them tired. It's actually great for establishing better sleep patterns." She handed Laurel the daily report sheet with perfectly neat handwriting, detailing feedings and diaper changes. Ronan agreed when Laurel mentioned her concerns that evening as they sat on the couch, the baby monitor glowing between them. "Remember how worn out we were after starting new jobs? Same thing, just tiny person version. It's probably good for him, and definitely good for us to finally get some sleep." But Calder's behavior grew more frantic with each passing day. He paced during their absences, according to their neighbor who checked on him at lunch, wearing a path in the carpet beside the front window. At pickup time, his inspection ritual lengthened, his tail stiff as a rod, occasionally emitting soft whines that made the hair on Laurel's arms stand on end. Laurel started a new section in her journal, the same one where she'd once tracked feeding schedules and developmental milestones. Monday, pickup 5:15 p.m. Calder extremely agitated, pacing and whining until allowed to inspect baby. Baby asleep in car, through dinner, and through night. Unusual, normally wakes at least once. Tuesday, pickup 5:20 p.m. Calder, sniffing mouth face for 10+ minutes, wouldn't stop even when offered treat. Baby lethargic, less responsive to tickling. Wednesday, pickup 5:05 p.m. Calder, barking at drop-off, had to be physically restrained by Ronan. Whining at pickup, trembling. Baby fell asleep in high chair mid-feeding, unusual paleness around lips. She added notes about slight changes in her son's skin color, the temperature of his hands and feet, how many wet diapers, anything that might form a pattern. She documented the subtle differences in his cry, less forceful, almost weak, and how his once voracious appetite had diminished. The pages filled quickly, her handwriting growing more urgent with each entry, but the meaning behind it all remained stubbornly unclear. One evening, while watching Calder perform his now routine inspection, Laurel noticed something odd. The dog seemed particularly focused on the baby's breath, repeatedly sniffing his mouth and making soft whining sounds. His intelligent amber eyes held an almost desperate quality, as if he were trying to communicate something vital. She leaned closer, trying to see what drew his attention. Her son's breathing seemed normal, perhaps a little shallow, but there was something different about his scent. A subtle sweetness she hadn't noticed before, like overripe fruit. She inhaled deeply, wondering if her mind was playing tricks on her. "What are you trying to tell me?" she whispered to Calder, her heart beginning to race. He looked up at her with those knowing amber eyes, a low whine vibrating in his chest, then went back to his careful investigation, nudging the baby's cheek with his nose. Laurel added the observation to her journal, a growing sense of unease settling in her stomach like a cold, heavy stone. Something wasn't right. She could feel it, just as surely as Calder seemed to sense it. The dog's medical alert training was responding to something that was happening at Sunshine Steps. But what? And would anyone believe her if all she had was a dog's behavior as evidence? The clock read 2:17 when Calder's whining pierced Laurel's sleep. She found him by the crib, pawing anxiously at the rails. Her son lay unnaturally still, skin clammy to the touch. "Baby." She lifted him, heart racing. His eyes fluttered open, then he vomited weakly down her nightgown. "Ronan," she called, clutching the baby close. "Something's wrong." They spent 3 hours in the emergency room, only to leave with the same dismissive pat on the shoulder. "New parent anxiety is completely normal," the doctor assured them. "His vitals are stable." But at 4:52 that same morning, Calder woke them again. This time Laurel was ready with a towel when her son threw up. "That's it." Ronan paced their bedroom after they cleaned up, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "The dog has to go. He's making you paranoid and none of us are sleeping." "He's warning us," Laurel protested. "Both times he knew before it happened. He's disrupting our lives. Look at you. You're exhausted, jumping at shadows. This isn't healthy, Laurel." She hugged herself, fighting tears. "I won't send him away. He's trying to help." "Help with what?" "The doctors say nothing's wrong." Their argument carried through the thin walls. A gentle knock interrupted them. Crosby Hale stood in the hallway in scrubs, her dark curls pulled back in a neat bun. "I heard raised voices. Everything okay?" "The dog," Ronan started. "Our son got sick," Laurel cut in. "Twice tonight. Calder warned us both times, but the ER found nothing wrong." Something flickered in Crosby's eyes. "Mind if I take a look? I just finished my shift." They led her to the nursery. Calder sat alert by the crib, tail thumping once in recognition. The baby dozed fitfully. Crosby watched him breathe for several long moments. "His respiratory rate seems a bit shallow. How long has this been happening?" "The vomiting just started. but he's been so tired lately, especially after daycare. Laurel described Calder's behavior changes, the inspection rituals. Crosby's expression turned thoughtful. Would you mind if I brought up something from my apartment? Just to check something. She returned with a small device. It's a glucose monitor. We use them all the time in the ER. May I? The tiny prick made the baby stir but not wake. They waited as numbers flickered on the screen. 62, Crosby read. That's low for his age, especially after eating recently. She showed Laurel how to use the monitor. Would you track his levels for a few days? Especially during these episodes Calder seems to detect? You believe me? Laurel whispered. Crosby's dark eyes met hers. I believe in paying attention when something feels wrong. Document everything. Times, symptoms, glucose readings. Data doesn't lie. After she left, Ronan touched Laurel's shoulder. I'm sorry about earlier. If Crosby thinks it's worth checking... Laurel squeezed his hand, then opened her journal to start a new section. At the top, she wrote, Glucose readings, in careful letters. The next days became a blur of numbers and observations, normal readings in the morning, steady drops after daycare, dramatic plunges before Calder's alerts. She created spreadsheets, tracking every detail. 110 at drop-off, she muttered, entering the day's first reading. 73 at pickup, 65 before dinner. The pattern emerged with disturbing clarity. Every day at daycare, her son's blood sugar decreased. On days home with her, it stayed stable. Calder's alerts coincided perfectly with the lowest drops. Look, she showed Crosby the data a week later. It's not anxiety or coincidence. Something's causing this. Crosby studied the numbers, her expression grave. No, this isn't normal variation. These patterns suggest something's actively affecting his glucose metabolism, especially during daycare hours. But what? And why doesn't anyone else see it? Because they're not looking for it, Crosby said simply. Without the numbers, it's easy to dismiss individual symptoms as normal baby things. But together... She tapped the journal. This tells a different story. Laurel glanced at Calder, who hadn't left the baby's side since his last alert. He knew. Somehow, he knew all along. Some dogs can detect blood sugar changes. It's why they train diabetic alert dogs. Crosby's voice softened. You might have gotten more than just a rescue pup. That night, Laurel sat cross-legged on the floor beside Calder, reviewing her data for the 100th time. The dog rested his head on her knee, his amber eyes full of understanding. Thank you, she whispered, scratching behind his ears, for not giving up, even when I doubted myself. Calder's tail thumped once against the floor. Together they watched over the sleeping baby, while Laurel's mind raced with questions about what could be causing such dangerous drops in her son's blood sugar, and why it only happened at daycare. The waiting room at Dr. Marston's office buzzed with the usual morning chaos of crying babies and tired parents. Laurel clutched her journal, its pages thick with carefully recorded numbers and observations. Her fingers traced the neat columns of data she'd gathered over the past 2 weeks. Mrs. Whitford, the nurse called, leading them to an examination room. Dr. Marston breezed in minutes later, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the fluorescent light. What brings you in today? Laurel pulled out her journal and the glucose monitor. I've been tracking my son's blood sugar levels. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened to the first page. Look at this pattern. Where did you get this monitor? He frowned, cutting her off. A friend who's a nurse helped me. But please, just look at the numbers. See how they drop during daycare hours? And here... She flipped pages frantically. These are the times Calder alerted us, perfectly matching the lowest readings. Mrs. Whitford. Dr. Marston's voice took on that gentle, patronizing tone she'd grown to hate. Home glucose testing isn't reliable without proper medical training, and you're letting your dog influence medical decisions? But the pattern is clear. Every daycare day, his levels plummet. At home, they're stable. She pushed the journal toward him. I've documented everything. He barely glanced at her careful records. I understand you're worried, but this self-diagnosing needs to stop. It's not healthy for you or your baby. I'm not self-diagnosing. Laurel's voice rose. I'm showing you evidence. Evidence gathered by an anxious mother with no medical training, using borrowed equipment. He sighed, removing his glasses. Have you considered talking to someone about postpartum anxiety? The suggestion hit like a slap. Laurel gathered her journal with shaking hands. Thank you for your time, she managed, though the words tasted bitter. She made it to her car before the tears came. Pulling out her phone, she texted Crosby. Can we talk? An hour later, they sat at Crosby's kitchen table, the journal open between them. Crosby reviewed the data with the focus it deserved, asking sharp questions about timing and symptoms. Let's organize this differently, she suggested, pulling out a fresh notebook. We'll chart the readings against specific times and activities. Her pen moved quickly, creating a clear timeline. See how the pattern emerges? Laurel leaned in. The drops always start at daycare. And the lowest points hit about an hour after pickup. Crosby circled several entries. Classic delayed hypoglycemic response. Something's affecting his glucose metabolism during daycare hours. But what? And why won't anyone listen? Because you're a mother, not a medical professional. Crosby's voice held understanding. It's not fair, but it's real. We need to make this data impossible to ignore. They spent hours refining the documentation, adding details about feeding times, sleep patterns, and behavioral changes. Crosby showed her how to note physical symptoms that could support the glucose readings. I have to talk to Delia, Laurel decided. She needs to know something's happening at daycare. The next morning she arrived early for drop-off, her revised journal tucked under her arm. Delia met her with her usual perfect smile. Could we talk privately? In Delia's office, Laurel laid out the evidence. His blood sugar drops significantly during daycare hours. Something here is affecting him. Delia's smile thinned. Are you suggesting we're doing something to harm the children? No, I just want to figure out what's causing this. Maybe it's something in his routine, or… Mrs. Whitford. Delia's voice turned frosty. We've been caring for infants for 15 years. Our protocols are impeccable. I'm just showing you the data. Data collected by an unlicensed person using unauthorized medical equipment. Delia stood. For liability reasons, we can't allow outside bottles or monitoring devices. If you're uncomfortable with our care, perhaps another facility would be more suitable. The threat hung in the air. Laurel thought of their tight budget, the long waiting lists at other daycares. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just want to understand what's happening to my baby. Nothing is happening except natural adjustment to routine. Delia's tone left no room for discussion. Now, shall we get him settled for the day? Laurel fought back angry tears as she kissed her son goodbye. In the following days, she felt Delia's subtle retaliation, curt responses during drop-off, notes about disruptive behavior that never happened before, implications that her anxiety was affecting her child. She's trying to gaslight me, Laurel told Crosby that weekend, making me sound like the problem. Keep documenting, Crosby advised. Every interaction, every symptom, every reading we can get. The truth will show itself. So Laurel documented. She noted how the staff now watched her with wary eyes, How her son was always changed just before pickup, any evidence of his day cleaned away. How Delia's perfect smile held an edge of warning. It became a silent battle. Laurel's careful observations against Delia's wall of denial. Each morning, Laurel's heart clenched as she handed over her baby. Each evening, she raced to check his blood sugar, while Calder sniffed him anxiously. The numbers didn't lie. Whatever was happening at Happy Horizons daycare, it was real. And Laurel was done letting others dismiss her concerns. The morning sun cast long shadows across Happy Horizons' parking lot as Laurel watched two mothers chat near their cars. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but their hushed voices carried. "Just don't ask too many questions," one woman was saying. "Delia doesn't like parents who make waves." "I noticed. When Tommy had that rash." "Exactly. Better to stay on her good side." Laurel slipped past them, her stomach churning. Inside, she found herself studying Delia with new eyes. The director's perfect appearance, not a hair out of place, cardigan precisely buttoned, seemed more like armor now. That afternoon, while preparing bottles, Laurel grabbed a marker. She drew tiny dots at the formula levels, too small to notice unless you were looking. Day after day, she checked the marks when she picked up her son. The differences were subtle, just a few millimeters off, but consistent. "Maybe they're topping off with water," she told Crosby during one of their evening talks. "Or maybe they're not feeding him all his bottles." "Document everything," Crosby reminded her. "Times, amounts, patterns." At home, the tension grew thicker. Ronan's patience wore visibly thin as Laurel reviewed her notes each night. "Honey, please," he said one evening, running his hands through his hair. "You're seeing conspiracies everywhere. It's not healthy." "They're not conspiracies if they're real," Laurel gestured at her journal. "The formula levels don't match. His sugar drops every single daycare day. Calder, don't start with the dog again." Ronan's voice held an edge. "He's making everything worse, getting you all worked up. He's trying to tell us something's wrong." "The only thing wrong is how this obsession is affecting our marriage." The words exploded from him. Immediately, regret crossed his face. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Laurel's voice was quiet. "You think I'm crazy. I think you're stressed and tired, and maybe—" He hesitated. "Maybe we should consider a different daycare, if you're this uncomfortable. The waiting lists are months long. We can't afford the premium centers." They'd had this conversation before. "And something is happening there, Ronan. I know it." He just shook his head, retreating to the garage where his tools waited. The door closed with careful restraint. The next day, Laurel arrived for pickup, just as Delia was greeting another parent. The director's voice carried down the hallway, honey-sweet, but with an underlying steel. "We simply can't accommodate special requests for every child," she was saying. "Our systems work because they're standardized. Surely you understand." The mother nodded quickly, backing down. Laurel recognized the defeated slump of her shoulders. Calder waited in the car, as usual, but today, when Laurel brought her son out, something was different. The dog's hackles rose immediately. His nose worked frantically over the baby's clothes, his whole body tense. Then Delia emerged from the building, walking toward them with some paperwork. Calder's head snapped up. A low, thunderous growl rolled from his chest. "Calder, no!" Laurel grabbed his collar, but the damage was done. Delia froze, her perfect mask slipping for just a moment. Something ugly flashed in her eyes before the professional smile returned. "Mrs. Whitford." Her voice could have frozen water. "I believe we need to discuss your dog's aggressive behavior." "He's never aggressive. He was just startled. He threatened the safety of our facility." Delia's words were precise, cutting. We cannot have dangerous animals on premises, even in the parking lot. It violates our insurance policies. He stays in the car. He's never even near the building. Nevertheless, Delia straightened her cardigan with sharp movements. Either you find alternative transportation arrangements, or we'll have to terminate your child's enrollment, for everyone's safety. The threat hung between them. Other parents hurried past, avoiding eye contact. You can't do that, Laurel whispered. There's no policy against having dogs in cars. I can do whatever is necessary to protect this facility. Delia's smile was razor thin now. Perhaps you should consider whether your attachment to this animal is worth your son's care arrangement. She turned and walked away, heels clicking on pavement. Laurel stood there, one hand on Calder's collar, the other clutching her baby. The dog's growl had subsided, but his eyes never left Delia's retreating form. That night, after the baby was asleep, Laurel sat with Calder on the floor of the nursery. His head rested in her lap, but his body remained tense, alert. "What are you trying to tell me, boy?" she whispered. "What do you know?" Calder just pressed closer, his eyes fixed on the crib, keeping watch, as always. In bed later, Laurel stared at the ceiling, replaying Delia's threat. The director's mask had slipped today, revealing something cold and hard beneath, something that cared more about control than children. The mystery of the formula levels nagged at her, the pattern of blood sugar drops, Calder's growing agitation. They were pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite solve, but one thing was becoming clear. Delia would do anything to stop her from finding the answer. Laurel's phone buzzed while she was folding laundry. The shelter's number flashed on the screen, making her stomach clench. Had someone reported Calder's growling at the daycare? "Mrs. Whitford?" A warm voice greeted her. "This is Sandra from Happy Tales Shelter. We've had an interesting development regarding Calder's history." Laurel sat heavily on the couch. "Is something wrong?" "Not at all. His microchip information finally came through. His previous owner has been trying to track him down, actually. A woman named Patricia Chen? She'd love to speak with you about him." 20 minutes later, Laurel's hands shook as she dialed Patricia's number. "Hello?" The voice was elderly, but sharp. "Is this Calder's new owner?" "Yes, I'm Laurel. The shelter said you wanted to—" "Oh, thank goodness he found a good home." Patricia's relief was palpable. "I've been so worried. After my Thomas passed, everything happened so fast. The kids thought they were helping, sending me to Florida, but Calder got lost in the shuffle." "He's been wonderful," Laurel said carefully. "But sometimes his behavior, he's very focused on my baby." A knowing laugh came through the phone. "Of course he is. That's what he was trained for. He's a medical alert dog, specializes in detecting blood sugar drops. Saved Thomas's life more times than I can count." The world tilted sideways. Laurel gripped the phone tighter. What? "Hypoglycemia detection. Cost a fortune to train him, but worth every penny. He can smell chemical changes before the meters even show it. Is he doing his alerts with your little one?" "His alerts?" Laurel's voice cracked. "The pawing? The whining? That's my boy. Pawing means it's starting. If he gets really worked up, growling, pacing, that means it's serious. Don't ignore those warnings, dear. He's never wrong." Tears spilled down Laurel's cheeks. "Everyone said I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid." "Oh, honey," Patricia's voice softened. "You listened to him, though, didn't you? That's what matters." "Yes." Laurel watched Calder, who lay alert by the baby monitor. Every time. They talked for another half hour. Patricia explained Calder's training signals, his routines, the incredible accuracy of his nose. With each detail, months of doubt fell away from Laurel's shoulders. When Ronan came home, she was waiting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. "I need you to listen," she said, before he could retreat to the garage. Really listen. She showed him the shelter's email, confirming Calder's history. Played the recording she'd made of Patricia's call. Pulled up articles about medical alert dogs and their success rates. This is what I've been trying to tell you, she finished. He's not making me paranoid. He's doing what he was trained to do, warning us when something's wrong. Ronan sank into a chair, staring at the evidence before him. Why didn't the shelter know this? Patricia was hospitalized after her husband died. Her kids cleaned out the house, surrendered Calder without knowing his background. The paperwork got separated. But, Ronan rubbed his face. It means something is causing our son's blood sugar to crash, and it's happening at daycare. The garage could wait. They spent the evening reviewing Laurel's logs, matching Calder's alerts to the glucose readings Crosby had helped her collect. The pattern was undeniable. We need proof, Ronan said finally. His voice had lost its dismissive edge. Real proof of what's happening there. Laurel squeezed his hand. Help me get it? He nodded slowly. What do you need? They worked late into the night, planning. A nanny cam disguised as a stuffed animal, a log of formula measurements before and after daycare. Crosby agreed to show them how to document blood sugar levels properly. We'll need pictures of any symptoms, Ronan said, his project planning skills kicking in. Times, dates, everything. Already started. Laurel pulled out her journal. And I've been marking the formula levels with UV pen. If someone's tampering with his bottles, we'll catch it. Ronan's jaw set firmly. No one messes with our kid. Calder watched them from his post by the nursery door, his amber eyes alert but calmer than they'd been in weeks, as if he knew that finally his humans understood what he'd been trying to tell them all along. That night, when the baby stirred and Calder padded over to nose at his blanket, neither Laurel nor Ronan hesitated. They checked his blood sugar immediately. The reading was low, but caught early enough to treat easily. Good boy, Ronan whispered, scratching Calder's ears. The dog leaned into his touch, tail wagging softly. Laurel watched them, her heart full. The doubt that had strained their marriage was melting away, replaced by shared purpose. Together with Calder, they would uncover the truth. Someone at that daycare was harming their child, and now they had a plan to prove it. Laurel spread her supplies across the kitchen counter while Crosby unpacked her medical bag. Tiny sensors winked under the fluorescent lights, delicate things that would track temperature changes to 1/10 of a degree. Next to them lay digital scales precise enough to measure fractions of an ounce. These will sync to your phone, Crosby explained, holding up one of the sensors. Any change in temperature or weight gets logged immediately with a timestamp. Laurel nodded, carefully inserting a sensor into the bottom of a bottle. Her hands were steady now, unlike the trembling uncertainty of weeks past. And they're waterproof? Completely. They'll survive washing, sterilizing, whatever Delia throws at them. Crosby's voice hardened at the daycare owner's name. Though I still say we should report her now. Not yet. Laurel reached for another bottle. We need solid proof, something they can't dismiss as a paranoid mother's imagination. They worked methodically, preparing 5 bottles with sensors. Crosby showed her how to calibrate the scales, explaining the relationship between formula concentration and blood sugar levels. The technical details grounded Laurel, transformed her worry into focused action. Remember, Crosby said, document everything. Times, amounts, symptoms, even things that seem minor. The pattern matters as much as individual incidents. Calder watched from his mat near the kitchen door, head tilted. Since discovering his training background, Laurel had noticed how his alerts varied in intensity. A gentle paw meant early warning. Pacing showed growing concern. The rare growls, those were emergencies. I've been mapping his signals too, Laurel said, pulling out her journal. She'd created a color-coded system: yellow for mild alerts, orange for moderate, red for severe. The pages showed clear clusters around daycare days. Crosby studied the log, impressed. This is exactly what we need. Medical alert dogs have been used as evidence before. Their accuracy rates are incredible. I just wish I'd known sooner. Laurel's voice caught. All those months thinking I was going crazy. Hey. Crosby gripped her shoulder. You knew something was wrong. You kept looking for answers when everyone else gave up. That's not crazy. That's being a good mother. They finished preparing the bottles, each one carefully labeled and logged. Laurel installed an app to track the sensor data, watching as the first readings appeared on her screen. The technology felt like armor against Delia's dismissals. The next morning, Laurel packed the monitored bottles with extra care. She'd added UV reactive marks on the caps, invisible unless viewed under blacklight. Any tampering would disrupt the pattern. Delia's smile was sharp when Laurel arrived. Good morning. And how's our concerned mother today? Fine, thank you. Laurel kept her voice neutral as she handed over the diaper bag. She'd gotten better at hiding her reactions, at playing the chastened parent who'd learned her lesson about making accusations. But Delia's eyes narrowed at her calm demeanor. The woman was too shrewd to miss the change in Laurel's confidence. Their daily exchanges had become a chess match of fake pleasantries. Throughout the day, Laurel watched the sensor readings on her phone. Temperature spikes showed when bottles were warmed. Weight changes tracked each feeding. She noted everything, cross-referencing with Calder's previous alerts. When she picked up her son that afternoon, his normal drowsiness was reflected in the data, formula levels slightly off, feeding times irregular. Calder sniffed him thoroughly, pawing once at his chest. Yellow alert, Laurel murmured, recording it. The dog's concern matched the sensor readings perfectly. Over the next week, the evidence mounted. Bottles returning with subtle weight discrepancies. Temperature fluctuations at odd times. Each anomaly correlated with Calder's warnings and subsequent blood sugar drops. Crosby helped her organize the data during her breaks, her medical expertise strengthening their case. See this pattern? She pointed to a graph. The concentration changes happen mid-morning, when they're supposedly just warming bottles. Could they be adding water? Laurel asked. Stretching the formula? Or replacing it entirely? Crosby's mouth tightened. Diluted formula would explain the hypoglycemia. It's dangerous, especially for infants. Laurel felt sick imagining it. But why? The parents provide all the formula. Cost-cutting? Negligence? Hard to prove without catching them in the act. That evening, as Laurel reviewed her growing evidence file, Delia's voicemail made her freeze. Hi, Laurel. Just calling to remind you about our policy on outside containers. Starting next week, we'll be providing bottles for all infants. It's a liability issue. I'm sure you understand. Laurel played it twice, hearing the threat beneath the professional tone. Delia was pushing back, trying to cut off their investigation. But she'd underestimated her opponent. Laurel had spent months building her case, supported by Crosby's medical knowledge and Calder's unfailing instincts. The sensors were just the latest layer of proof. She thought of her son's pale face during those episodes, of Calder's desperate attempts to warn them. The fear that had once paralyzed her now hardened into determination. Delia might control the daycare, but she couldn't hide the truth forever. Not this time, Laurel whispered, adding the voicemail to her evidence file. Beside her, Calder's ears perked up, his amber eyes alert and steady. They were no longer just gathering data. They were building a shield wall against whatever came next. The next morning started like any other, but Laurel's phone buzzed with alerts before noon. The sensor readings were all wrong, volume levels dropping faster than normal feeding should allow. Her hands trembled violently as she checked the timestamps against her meticulous logs, a cold knot of dread forming in her stomach. "No, no, no," she whispered, watching the numbers fluctuate with growing horror. The temperature readings suggested the bottles had been opened multiple times, cooling and warming repeatedly, not just for regular feedings. Each data point confirmed what she'd feared, but couldn't prove until now. When she arrived for pickup, her son's face was pale and clammy, his normally rosy cheeks ashen under the fluorescent lights. The moment she lifted him from the crib, Calder erupted, barking sharply and urgently, something he rarely did outside of emergencies. His muscular body tensed as his paws batted desperately at her legs, his amber eyes wide with alarm as she hurried to strap the baby into his car seat. "Such a noisy dog," Delia commented, her smile tight and eyes cold despite her pleasant tone. "Perhaps he needs more training? We can't have that kind of disruption around the other children." Laurel didn't answer, her fingers fumbling with the car seat straps as she focused solely on getting to her car. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird. Once safely inside with doors locked, she pricked her son's heel with the glucose monitor, wincing at his weak cry of protest. The reading made her gasp, dangerously low, just like all the other daycare days, confirming the pattern she'd been documenting for weeks. Calder wouldn't settle, his large shepherd body pressing insistently against the car seat. He whined continuously, a high-pitched sound of distress that filled the small space. His intelligent amber eyes fixed unwaveringly on the baby's face, showing the same unmistakable urgency she'd seen during previous episodes, his scarred foreleg pawing gently at the car seat. "I know, boy. I see it too." Laurel's voice shook as she pulled out of the parking spot, one hand reaching back to briefly touch Calder's head in acknowledgement. But instead of turning toward home as she always did, she swung the car around in a decisive arc and parked directly in front of the daycare's entrance, tires crunching on the gravel. She marched back inside with new determination hardening her features, Calder at her heels moving with disciplined alertness. The dog's nails clicked rapidly against the linoleum as they approached the front desk. "I need to see the formula preparation area," she demanded, her soft-spoken manner giving way to unmistakable authority. Delia stepped swiftly in front of the hallway, arms crossed over her tailored cardigan, her blonde hair catching the light as she positioned herself as a human barrier. "I'm sorry, but parents aren't allowed in food preparation areas. It's against health code regulations," she stated firmly, her practiced smile never reaching her eyes. "That's not true, and you know it." Laurel stood taller, trying to look past her, catching glimpses of the kitchen space beyond. The scent of cleaning solution and powdered formula hung in the air. "Parents have a right to inspect any area where their children's food is handled. It's in the state child care guidelines." "Not without prior arrangement and proper authorization." Delia's voice hardened, her manicured fingers gripping her elbows tightly. "If you have concerns, you can file them through proper channels. We have procedures for these things." But Laurel had already spotted something through the doorway. A row of formula cans on the counter, several with their tops removed, and plastic measuring scoops resting beside them. They were unmistakably her son's brand, the ones she provided each week with their distinctive blue label. Even from across the room, she could see they were half empty, though she'd just brought full ones yesterday, their safety seals intact. "Those are my son's cans," she said, pointing with a steady hand. "Why are they opened when I send pre-made bottles? Why would you need to open them at all?" "Mrs. Whitford." Delia stepped closer, invading Laurel's personal space, dropping her voice to a threatening whisper. "I've been very patient with your anxieties, more accommodating than most centers would be. But if you continue this disruptive behavior, I'll have no choice but to terminate your child's enrollment. Think about what you're doing. You're diluting the formula, aren't you?" The words burst out before Laurel could stop them, echoing in the empty reception area. "That's why his blood sugar keeps crashing after every visit. You're stretching it out, making it last longer, saving money by putting water where there should be nutrition." That's a serious accusation. Delia's face flushed an angry red, her polished exterior cracking momentarily. "One that could have legal consequences for you if you spread such lies. Do you understand what defamation is, Mrs. Whitford?" Calder growled beside her, low and warning, the sound rumbling from deep in his chest. Delia's eyes flicked to him, showing the first hint of uncertainty Laurel had ever seen in the woman's carefully controlled expression. "I have proof," Laurel said quietly, her green eyes steady despite her racing heart. "Temperature logs, weight measurements, feeding times, everything's documented in a system that timestamps and can't be altered, and now I can see exactly where my son's formula is going." "Get out!" Delia's voice turned to ice, all pretense of professional courtesy abandoned. "Take your dangerous dog and your wild theories and get out of my facility. You'll be receiving official notice of termination by tomorrow morning." "You can't hide this forever," Laurel said, backing toward the door, one hand on Calder's collar. "Other parents will notice. Other babies will get sick. Some already have, haven't they? That's what the Morellis were complaining about last week." "No one will believe you." Delia's smile returned, cruel and confident, smoothing her cardigan with practiced hands. "They'll see what they always see. An anxious mother imagining problems, making connections where none exist. Now leave before I call the police about your trespassing and that aggressive animal." Laurel retreated to her car, hands shaking as she checked her son again. The glucose reading had dropped even lower, the numbers flashing red on the small screen. She quickly offered him a bottle of properly mixed formula from her emergency supply. Calder pressed against her legs, whining softly, his earlier aggression replaced by worried vigilance as he kept his eyes fixed on the baby. She took detailed photos of the sensor data, the formula cans visible through the window, and added them to her growing file of evidence stored both on her phone and backed up to a secure cloud account. The truth was there in the numbers, in the opened cans, in her dog's unwavering alerts. But Delia was right about one thing. She needed more than suspicions and sensor readings. She needed undeniable proof of what was happening inside those walls, something no one could dismiss as maternal anxiety. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from Crosby. "How bad?" "Worse than we thought," Laurel typed back, her thumb smudging the screen slightly as she glanced anxiously at her son. "She's not even trying to hide it anymore. Saw the cans myself. Kicked out officially." She looked at her son in the rearview mirror, his little face still too pale against the blue fabric of the car seat, his eyelids fluttering with exhaustion. Calder sat alert beside the car seat, his disciplined posture unwavering, ready to signal at the first sign of distress. The dog had been right all along, trying to warn them of danger when everyone else dismissed their concerns. Now it was Laurel's turn to protect not just her child, but all the babies in Delia's care, even if it meant standing alone against a system designed to doubt mothers like her. The first tremor was subtle, just a tiny twitch in her baby's arm. But Laurel had watched her son's every movement for months now, and this was different. Wrong. No, no, no. She fumbled with the car seat straps, her fingers clumsy with fear. Calder paced anxiously in the narrow space between the car seats, his whining growing more frantic. The second tremor rocked her baby's whole body. His eyes rolled back, tiny limbs jerking rhythmically. Laurel snatched her phone from the cup holder, but her hands shook so badly she dropped it. When she finally gripped it properly, she had just started to dial when Delia appeared at her car window. "What do you think you're doing?" Delia yanked open the car door. "You're being hysterical again. He's seizing." Laurel tried to shield her phone as Delia grabbed for it. "I need to call an ambulance." "You absolutely will not." Delia's manicured nails dug into Laurel's wrist. "Do you know what an ambulance visit will do to my facility's reputation?" They struggled over the phone, Delia trying to wrench it away while Laurel desperately held on. In the back seat, the baby's seizure intensified. Calder's barking reached a fever pitch, echoing off the parking lot's concrete walls. "Let go!" Laurel kicked out, catching Delia in the shin. The phone clattered to the pavement, but the call had already gone through to Crosby's number from her recent texts. "Laurel?" Crosby's voice crackled through the speaker. "What's happening?" "He's seizing." Laurel dove for the phone, snatching it before Delia could reach it. "The baby, I don't know what to do." "Get your hands off that phone." Delia made another grab, but Calder lunged between them, his teeth bared. She stumbled backward, eyes wide. "Listen carefully." Crosby's voice was steady, professional. "I'm calling 911 from my line. Is he breathing?" Laurel scrambled into the back seat, laying her hand on her son's chest. "Yes, fast and shallow." "Check his glucose now." Laurel's fingers trembled as she used the monitor. The number made her cry out, 28. "There's glucose gel in the emergency kit I gave you," Crosby directed. "Dark blue tube. Squeeze it along his gums, the whole tube. Do it now." Laurel dove for her diaper bag, scattering contents until she found the kit. Behind her, Delia's voice rose in panic. "This is ridiculous. He just needs a nap. If you'd stop overfeeding him—" "Shut up!" Laurel screamed, ripping open the glucose tube. "You did this! You've been starving him!" Her hands steadied as she squeezed the gel carefully along her baby's gum line, just as Crosby instructed. The seizure continued, each jerk feeling like it lasted forever. "Good," Crosby coached through the speaker. "Keep him on his side. How long has he been seizing?" 3 minutes, maybe 4. Laurel stroked her son's forehead. "Come on, baby. Come on." "You're making a terrible mistake," Delia said, but her voice had lost its authority. She kept glancing towards the street, where distant sirens had begun to wail. The baby's jerking movements gradually slowed. His eyes fluttered, then focused. When he began to cry, a weak, thready wail, it was the most beautiful sound Laurel had ever heard. "He's coming around," she sobbed into the phone. "The seizure's stopping." "EMTs are 1 minute out," Crosby replied. "I'm on my way too. Don't let anyone near him until they arrive." Delia paced by the car, her perfect composure cracking. "This is all a misunderstanding. He was fine 5 minutes ago. If you'd just listened to me." "If I'd listened to you, he could be dead." Laurel cradled her son close, while Calder pressed against them both, still growling at Delia. "You've been diluting his formula for weeks, months maybe. How many other babies have you done this to?" Red and white lights flooded the parking lot as 2 ambulances screamed around the corner. Delia turned to run, but Calder's bark stopped her short. She froze, trapped between the approaching EMTs and the furious dog. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," one EMT called out, hurrying toward them with equipment in hand. Laurel held her baby tighter as the medical team surrounded them, rattling off vital signs and glucose readings. Through it all, she kept her eyes locked on Delia, who stood helplessly by as her carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The truth would come out now. All of it. In the distance, more sirens approached. Police this time, Laurel guessed. She kissed her son's forehead as the EMTs prepared him for transport, silently thanking Calder for his relentless warnings and Crosby for her unwavering support. "Ready for transport," an EMT announced. securing the baby onto a tiny stretcher. "Mother can ride with us?" As they loaded her son into the ambulance, Laurel heard Crosby's voice still on the phone. "I'm almost there. You did everything right, Laurel. Everything right." The fluorescent lights of the emergency room cast harsh shadows as nurses rushed Laurel's baby through double doors. The cold, sterile brightness highlighted every worried line on their faces as they moved with practiced urgency. Her legs felt weak, trembling beneath her like saplings in a storm, but Crosby's steady hand on her elbow kept her moving forward through the chaos of beeping, machines, and hurried medical staff. "Blood sugar 28 on arrival," the paramedic reported to the attending physician, his voice clinically detached, yet tinged with concern. "History of unexplained hypoglycemic episodes. We administered glucose en route. Slight improvement noted." Laurel clutched her phone in white-knuckled fingers, the screen glowing faintly with all her careful documentation. Her digital armor in this battle. The bottle sensors with their damning temperature fluctuations. The meticulously logged glucose readings that told a story no one had wanted to hear. Calder's alerts, time-stamped and described in painful detail. Everything that proved she wasn't crazy, wasn't just an anxious first-time mother imagining dangers. The evidence felt both heavy and precious in her hand. "Mrs. Whitford?" A familiar voice made her stomach clench with a visceral dread that crawled up her spine. Dr. Marston stood in the doorway, his expression grave beneath the unflattering hospital lights that deepened every crease in his forehead. His white coat seemed to emphasize his authority as he stepped forward. "I've been called in as your son's primary physician. Given our previous consultations, I felt it necessary to oversee this case personally." Before he could continue his practiced speech, Crosby stepped forward, her lean frame radiating professional confidence. Her ID badge caught the light as she positioned herself slightly between Laurel and the doctor. "I'm Nurse Hale from the ER. I've been tracking this case independently for the past 2 weeks. The baby's showing clear signs of sustained malnutrition and recurring hypoglycemia that follows a distinct pattern." Dr. Marston's lips tightened, a thin line of disapproval cutting across his face. "I have serious concerns about the mother's mental state. She's been fixating on imagined health issues for months. We've discussed maternal anxiety in our previous appointments." "With all due respect," Crosby cut in, her voice firm but measured, the voice of someone used to challenging doctors when patients' lives were at stake. "I have the data logs right here." She pulled up charts on her tablet, the blue light illuminating her determined features. "Consistent hypoglycemic episodes following daycare attendance. Temperature sensors showing formula dilution patterns. Abnormal weight fluctuations that don't align with normal infant development. It's not imagination. It's evidence, documented systematically over weeks." The emergency room doors burst open with a whoosh of air from the corridor. Ronan rushed in, his work boots leaving muddy prints on the linoleum, a trail of his panic visible for all to see. Dust from the construction site still clung to his jacket, evidence he hadn't even taken time to clean up before racing to the hospital. "Laurel, I came as soon as I heard." His arms wrapped around her, solid and sure, smelling of sawdust and sweat and home. For the first time since the Haas ambulance arrived, she felt her breathing steady slightly. "What happened? Is he okay?" Before she could answer, raised voices echoed from the hallway, growing louder with each passing second. Delia strode in, her perfect blonde hair barely disturbed despite her evident agitation. A sharp-suited man beside her whose expression was professionally indignant, his leather briefcase clutched tightly in manicured hands. "Mrs. Whitford," the man announced with practiced authority, his voice cutting through the medical chatter like a knife. "I'm Gregory Phillips, Mrs. Prentice's attorney. We demand you cease making these outrageous allegations immediately. This stops now, before irreparable damage is done to my client's reputation and business." Ronan's arm tightened protectively around Laurel, his confusion evident in the furrow of his brow. What allegations? What's going on? Our son is fighting for his life in there, and you're talking about reputations. Your wife is attempting to destroy my client's reputation, Phillips said, adjusting his silk tie with one hand. She's claiming Mrs. Prentice deliberately undernourished her child, a ridiculous accusation with zero evidence that could ruin a 15-year business built on trust and excellence in childcare. Zero evidence? Laurel pulled away from Ronan, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten as righteous anger flooded her system. Her hands shook, not with uncertainty, but with barely contained fury as she opened her phone and navigated to her meticulously organized files. I have weeks of data. Temperature logs showing watered-down formula, consistently cooler than freshly prepared bottles should be. Weight measurements showing gains at home and losses after daycare days. Glucose readings that match exactly with daycare days versus home days. It's all here, all documented. Amateur measurements from an unstable mother, Dr. Marston interjected, his dismissive tone making Laurel flinch as if struck. I'm filing a formal report recommending psychological evaluation for possible Munchausen by proxy syndrome. Stop. Ronan's voice cut through the chaos, deeper and firmer than Laurel had heard in months. The construction foreman who commanded dozens of workers on dangerous sites emerged in this sterile hospital hallway. Show me the data, Laurel. She handed him her phone, her heart in her throat as she watched his expression. His eyes, practical and detail-oriented from years of reading complex blueprints, narrowed as he scrolled through the meticulous logs. His construction foreman's eye for detail took in every graph, every timestamp, every annotation she'd added in the quiet darkness while their baby slept. This is what you've been tracking? He asked quietly, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. This is what Calder was trying to tell us? What you've been trying to tell me for weeks? Laurel nodded, throat too tight for words, tears threatening to spill over. Mrs. Prentice. Ronan turned to Delia, his normally diplomatic tone hardened to steel. Did you dilute our son's formula? Did you water down what we trusted you to give him? Absolutely not. Delia's perfect makeup couldn't hide her sudden pallor, the way the blood drained from beneath her expertly applied blush. She smoothed her cardigan with trembling fingers. I've run my facility for 15 years. Parents trust me with their most precious possessions. I would never jeopardize a child's health. This is absurd. Then you won't mind if the police test the formula cans at your daycare? Crosby asked, arching one eyebrow. Her calm was that of someone who had dealt with medical emergencies for years, unflappable in the face of denial. The ones Laurel saw half empty today? The ones that should have been full based on the number of infants in your care and the feeding schedule you claim to follow? Phillips stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Delia like a human shield. Any testing requires a warrant, and I'm serving notice that any defamatory statements made outside this room will result in immediate legal action. My client has a spotless record. Excuse me. A new voice joined the fray, clear and authoritative. A woman in a dark suit, her badge already in hand, stepped into the increasingly crowded hallway. I'm Inspector Chen, State Licensing Board for Early Childhood Facilities. We received an emergency report about suspected endangerment and food tampering at Little Treasures Daycare. Delia's lawyer paled visibly, his confident demeanor cracking at the edges. My client has no comment at this time. We request all communication go through my office effective immediately. I have plenty to share, Laurel said, drawing strength from Ronan's presence beside her, from Crosby's unwavering support, from the thought of her baby fighting in the next room. She held up her phone like a talisman. Every bit of data is backed up to the cloud, time-stamped, verified independently by an ER nurse, and there's more. Security footage from the parking lot showing today's incident when Calder refused to leave the daycare, when he tried to warn us again. The inspector nodded, making notes on her tablet. We'll need all of that. And Dr. Marston, the board will want to review your decision to dismiss Mrs. Whitford's concerns despite documented evidence. Medical negligence falls under our purview when it involves licensed childcare facilities. Dr. Marston sputtered, his authoritative demeanor fracturing. I was following standard protocols. There was no reason to suspect. Your protocols ignored a mother's valid concerns and a trained medical alert dog's warnings, Crosby said, her professional calm belied by the flash of anger in her eyes. That's negligence, plain and simple. That dog was trying to tell everyone something was wrong, and no one listened except Laurel. A nurse appeared in the doorway, her scrubs rumpled from hours on shift. Baby's glucose is stabilizing. We've got the IV dextrose running and his levels are coming up. Parents can come back now. Ronan took Laurel's hand, his calloused palm warm against her cold fingers. We'll deal with the rest later. Let's see our son. As they walked to the treatment room, Laurel heard Delia's lawyer urgently whispering about damage control and possible settlements and keeping this quiet. The inspector's voice rose above them, talking about emergency inspections and formula testing. But none of it mattered as much as Ronan's quiet words, spoken just for her. I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. You knew. You knew all along, when everyone else thought you were overreacting. And now we'll make sure this never happens to another baby. Not ever again. Laurel squeezed his hand as they approached their son's bed, her heart expanding with both relief and lingering fear. The tiny monitor attached to his perfect foot showed normal glucose levels at last, the numbers glowing green instead of alarming red. Their baby was sleeping peacefully, his chest rising and falling in the rhythm she had memorized since birth, safe under the watchful eyes of the medical team that had finally heard her pleas. And outside in the parking lot, Calder waited patiently in their car, his mission accomplished. His intelligent amber eyes would be fixed on the hospital entrance, his job of warning them finally, fully understood. Later, she would bring him a treat and whisper, "Good dog," into his fur. But for now, knowing he was there was enough. The silent guardian who had helped save their child when no one else would listen. The morning sun cast long shadows across the daycare's cheerful facade as police cruisers pulled up silently, lights off. Inspector Chen stood beside Laurel on the sidewalk, watching as officers positioned themselves around the building's exits. Are you ready for this? The inspector asked, adjusting her blazer. Laurel nodded, her heart pounding. Through the front windows, she could see children settling in for morning activities, unaware of what was about to unfold. Inspector Chen gave a signal, and the team moved in with practiced efficiency. Laurel followed them inside, where Delia stood frozen at her desk, perfect smile slipping as officers filled her office. What is the meaning of this? Delia's voice cracked, her manicured hands gripping the edge of her desk. Mrs. Prentice, we have a warrant to search these premises, Inspector Chen announced, presenting the document. Please step aside. Officers began methodically photographing and bagging evidence while Delia watched, her composed facade crumbling. In the kitchen, investigators discovered a stack of formula cans. Laurel's stomach turned as they documented the tampered contents. Ma'am, these cans show signs of dilution, one officer reported, and there's a significant discrepancy between purchase records and inventory. Delia's face flushed. That's ridiculous! We follow strict nutritional guidelines. Like the guidelines about proper staff-to-child ratios? Inspector Chen interrupted, reviewing documents from Delia's computer. Because your financial records show you've been severely understaffed for months while reporting full coverage. The morning took an unexpected turn when another parent burst in, Mrs. Rodriguez, clutching her phone. I have proof, she declared. I've been recording everything. Inspector Chen quickly ushered her into a private room. Mrs. Rodriguez's hands shook as she played the footage. A hidden camera disguised as a teddy bear had captured staff watering down bottles, skipping feedings, and leaving infants unattended. "I knew something was wrong," Mrs. Rodriguez whispered. "My baby kept coming home hungry, but everyone said I was being paranoid." Laurel reached for the woman's hand, recognizing her own pain in those words. "They told me the same thing." More parents began arriving, drawn by news spreading through their community. Each brought their own stories: babies with mysterious weight loss, unexplained lethargy, concerns dismissed as first-time parent anxiety. Dr. Marston appeared, summoned by the investigation. His usual confidence wavered as he faced a room full of angry parents and stern officials. "Doctor," Inspector Chen said, "we need to discuss your role in this situation. Multiple parents reported bringing concerns to you about their infant's symptoms." "I followed standard protocols," he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Standard protocols include dismissing a medical alert dog's warnings?" Laurel asked. "Ignoring documented evidence of hypoglycemia?" The doctor's face reddened. "You can't expect me to take a dog's behavior as medical evidence. That dog was right," Mrs. Rodriguez cut in, "and you wouldn't listen to any of us." In Delia's office, investigators uncovered more damning evidence: years of falsified records, cutting corners on food, staff, and safety measures, all while charging premium rates for exceptional care. "Mrs. Prentice," an officer approached with handcuffs, "you're under arrest for multiple counts of child endangerment and fraud." Delia's perfectly styled hair fell across her face as she slumped in her chair. "You don't understand," she pleaded. "The costs kept rising. Parents wanted lower rates. I had to make it work somehow." "By starving babies?" Laurel's voice shook with anger. "By ignoring their cries because you were understaffed?" "I built this place from nothing," Delia shouted, mask finally shattering. 15 years of reputation, destroyed because you couldn't mind your own business." "My child's health is my business," Laurel replied firmly. "Every child here was your responsibility, and you betrayed that trust." As officers led Delia away, parents hugged each other, many crying with relief and lingering fear. Inspector Chen assured them that a thorough investigation would examine every aspect of the daycare's operations. Dr. Marston stood apart, watching as his professional judgment came under scrutiny. The medical board representative had arrived, requesting his immediate presence for questioning about his repeated dismissal of parent concerns. "Doctor," the representative said, "we'll need to review all records related to these cases. Your license may be suspended pending investigation." Laurel observed it all with a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, and lingering sadness for all the babies who had suffered silently. Parents approached her one by one, sharing their stories, thanking her for being the one who finally broke through the wall of denial. "How did you know?" they asked. "How did you make them listen?" "I had help," Laurel answered, thinking of Calder waiting at home. "I learned to trust what I saw, even when everyone said I was wrong, and I found people who were willing to look at the evidence." Inspector Chen appeared at her side. "We'll need your testimony for the case," she said quietly. "All your documentation will be crucial evidence." Laurel nodded, watching as officers continued gathering evidence, each bottle, each record, each fragment of truth finally coming to light. The morning sun now streamed fully through the windows, illuminating a space that would never again hide such dark secrets. Parents gathered their children, holding them close, while social services arrived to help arrange emergency alternative care. The daycare's cheerful walls seemed to mock the gravity of what had happened within them, but today marked the end of that deception. As Delia was placed in a police car, her carefully maintained image completely shattered, Laurel thought of all the times she had doubted herself, all the nights she had questioned her own judgment. The truth had been there all along, waiting for someone brave enough to keep pushing until it was finally revealed. The specialist's office felt different from Dr. Marston's, warmer somehow, with walls covered in children's artwork and thank-you notes from grateful families. Dr. Sullivan studied the thick folder of records on her desk, nodding as she reviewed the test results. Congenital hyperinsulinism, she confirmed, her kind eyes meeting Laurel's. Your son's pancreas produces too much insulin, which causes those dangerous drops in blood sugar. It's rare, but completely manageable with proper treatment. Laurel squeezed Ronan's hand, feeling the steady pressure of his return grip. After months of uncertainty, having a name for their struggle and a path forward felt like finally breaking through storm clouds into clear sky. The medication we're prescribing will help regulate his insulin production, Dr. Sullivan explained. We'll need regular monitoring, but children with this condition can lead perfectly normal lives. On the floor beside them, Calder lay calmly, his service vest pristine and official. The shelter had helped restore his certification after learning of his critical role in uncovering the truth. His amber eyes stayed focused on the baby, ever watchful. Your dog's alerts will still be valuable, Dr. Sullivan added. Many families with this condition rely on service animals as an extra safety measure. He clearly knows his job well. Leaving the office, Laurel felt lighter than she had in months. The sidewalk was dappled with late afternoon sunshine, and her son dozed peacefully in his carrier, his cheeks pink and healthy. I've been thinking, Ronan said as they walked to the car. Maybe we should finish that nursery mural we started before everything. His voice carried a hint of apology for all the times he'd doubted her. I'd like that, Laurel smiled, though we might need help with the artistic parts. I know someone who's pretty good with a paintbrush, came Crosby's voice from behind them. She was just finishing her shift, still in her scrubs. I might be convinced to lend my talents for the price of pizza. Their laughter felt natural now, the tension of recent months finally easing. Crosby had become more than just a neighbor. She was family, bound to them by shared battles and unwavering support. At home, Laurel watched as Calder settled into his spot beside the crib, his posture relaxed but alert. His old service vest hung proudly on a hook nearby, a symbol of redemption and purpose restored. Remember when I wanted to return him? Ronan said softly, coming up behind her. I've never been so glad to be wrong. Laurel leaned back against him, taking in the peaceful scene. We all had to learn to trust what was right in front of us. That evening, their small kitchen filled with the warmth of friendship and healing. Crosby arrived with paint swatches and pizza, spreading them across the table as they planned the nursery's transformation. Their son played contentedly in his bouncer, Calder never far from his side. I'm thinking a woodland theme, Crosby suggested, sketching quick ideas on a napkin. Trees, animals, maybe some stars. Perfect for our little warrior, Ronan agreed, ruffling the baby's hair. Laurel watched them, her heart full. The fear that had once consumed her days had transformed into something stronger, a quiet confidence in her own instincts, a deep trust in the bonds they'd forged through adversity. The investigation into Delia's daycare had revealed dozens of affected families, each story adding to the weight of evidence. But it had also revealed something else, the power of parents who refused to be silenced, who fought for their children despite every dismissal and doubt. Later, after Crosby had gone home and Ronan was doing the dishes, Laurel sat in the nursery's rocking chair. Her son dozed in her arms, his breathing steady and strong. Calder rested his head against her knee, his presence as reassuring as ever. We did it, didn't we? She whispered to him. We kept him safe. The dog's tail thumped softly against the floor, his eyes reflecting complete devotion. He had never doubted his purpose, never questioned the truth he knew in his bones. In that way, he had taught her the most important lesson, that a mother's instincts, like his, were a compass pointing true north. The medication schedule on the refrigerator no longer felt like a burden, but a map to stability. The glucose monitor that had once represented fear now gave them confidence and control. Each small victory, a normal reading, a peaceful night, a day full of energy and smiles, added another stone to the foundation of their new normal. Through the window, stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring more painting, more laughter, more steps forward on this path they now walked with certainty. Laurel's quiet courage had transformed their story from one of fear to one of triumph, not through loud declarations but through persistent faith in what she knew to be true. Her son stirred slightly, and she adjusted his blanket, marveling at how far they'd come. The journey had changed them all. Ronan's renewed faith in her, Crosby's steadfast friendship, Calder's restored purpose. But perhaps she had changed the most, no longer the uncertain new mother questioning her every instinct, but a woman who had learned to stand in her own truth, even when she stood alone. The soft domestic sounds of their evening routine floated through the house, Ronan humming as he cleaned up, Calder's gentle snoring, the distant song of crickets beginning their nightly chorus. This was her victory, not just in exposing wrongdoing or finding proper medical care, but in creating this sanctuary of trust and understanding, where fear had no place and love grew stronger with each passing day.